All right, here we are. If you're jumping into the junk removal business and you need to know more, you're in the right place. Here on the Trash Talk Business Podcast, we cover everything you need to know to start, grow, and scale, along with a little bit of trash talk here and there. I'm your host, Andy Weins, joined by Casey Bubba Lawrence, my partner in crime down there in the great state of Texas. Today, we have a special guest. Mike is joining us. Mike, you know what? I'll let you do your own introduction. No one can speak to you as well as you. Mike, tell us who you are, why you're here, and why you're joining us on the Trash Talk Business Podcast.
Okay. Well, I'm Mike Malatesta, and thank you for having me, guys. It's an honor to be on your podcast. Why Trash Talk? Why am I here? Well, I met Andy, and turns out that we have a lot in common, and I have trash in my veins, I guess, from the time I was a junior in college. I've been involved in the waste business. Started as a driving a roll-off truck and a lugger truck while I was between my junior and senior year, and that's what kind of got me started on my career trajectory. I got into the trash business because I like to drive trucks. I've loved trucks since I was a little kid, and when I got that job and saw all the cool work that not only that those particular trucks can do, but the environmental work that we were doing, I thought, well, maybe this is something that I could make a career out of. And so I did. Started working with a big company, one of the biggest at the time, and I moved up really fast. And I was doing all different kinds of things, traveling to different cities, moving. I moved 4 times in 5 years, just always saying yes to everything. And I got out to Milwaukee, my last transfer, and I was out in Milwaukee for about 15 months, and I got fired from that job. And so I'm sort of, trying to think of what's the next thing for me. And when I was a little kid, when I was 4 years old, I lived across the street from a construction company. And in the summers, I would sit on the curb and I would watch the guys bring their trucks back. And it was just like an amazing experience. And I thought to myself, I think the smell and the smoke and, the dust and just the guys, it was all like great. And I thought to myself, I like to think I thought to myself as a 4-year-old, it would be cool to someday own my own trucks, right? So here I am in Milwaukee. I don't know anybody or very few people. Get fired from a job that I thought maybe I would be at forever and be the CEO of this big company at some point. And I was looking at my options and they weren't very attractive. And so I was very fortunate to run into a person named Butch Weins who thought there was something in me. He was a little older than I was, but he thought there was something in me. And I like to say Butch was a farmer most of his life, but we met in the waste business while I was in Milwaukee. And I like to say that he, germinated this entrepreneurial seed that was planted in me on the curb in front of my house when I was 4 years old. And we started a waste business together, liquid waste though, not trash. And through 22 years of making a lot of mistakes, but also making some good decisions as well, we built a really big company, and we ended up selling that business in 2015. And then I've gone on to other things in the waste business and other businesses as well. But it all goes back to that curb, and then me getting the job driving the garbage truck when I was 20.
What kind of liquid waste were you getting rid of?
Well, we specialized in manufacturing byproduct liquid waste, so essentially contaminated wastewater that's generated from making all the products that you love to have around your house every day and make life, really easy, like the clothes you're wearing, for example, and all the gear you've got in front of you, and basically every material that your home and vehicle are made out of produce some type of contaminated wastewater in the making of them. So that's what we would do. We would go into factories, we would haul that, use vacuum trucks, and we would haul that material away. At first, we took it to treatment plants that other people owned, and then eventually we got into the treatment business, and expanded into all other kinds of waste. But that's how we started.
So let's dial it back. So what was the year, just for reference sake, what was the year
Yeah.
that you got fired from
1992.
so 92. All right. So I just want
Yeah.
to put things in perspective. We have some listeners right now that probably weren't even born in 1992. And
Yeah, probably.
not here to date you, but what's interesting is, we see this in the military. Like, I'm 38 years old. I am old for the Army, right? I got 18 years in. I'm in the twilight of my career in the military, right? You're over 30, you're old, right? But I got more years in the military now than some of the kids that are coming in and some of the people that I interact with. And there's a great opportunity to pass on that knowledge. So, without getting specific into wastewater, but just this industry in general, what were some of those mistakes you made early and often when you said, all right, I'm an entrepreneur, let me just scratch that itch? What were some of those mistakes you made? What did you learn from them? And what can our listeners and even myself and Casey learn from you so that we don't make the same, I don't like to call them mistakes, but choices that didn't work out, right? What were some of those things that you did that, looking back, you're like, man, that I wouldn't do this again because I learned X, Y, Z?
Yeah. Yeah, a good question. And, it's everybody usually sort of has the same go-to answer, like, oh, I made so many mistakes. I made every mistake you could make, I don't think we made every mistake that we could make. But, I'll tell you one thing that we did that was right from the start, and then I'll tell you some other things. The first thing, it's hard to choose a partner. But when Butch and I got together, we didn't know each other very well. So it was kind of a risk, choosing each other as a partner. But that was it turned out to be one of the best choices that we made, because each of us complemented the other so well. And we knew we could count on each other. And when you get into a business, like an entrepreneurial business especially, you're going to need to count on people. And Butch knew he could count on me, and I knew I could count on him. Now, I approached everybody that came into my world, and I still do this today, Andy, as someone that I am betting I can count on. And unfortunately, I do not have like a perfect record when it comes to that presumption actually working out. So, the whole like gut feel thing to hiring someone was certainly a lesson that we learned. And I think ultimately it always comes down to gut feel, but there's a lot of steps in between that make your gut feel a little bit more accurate, I think, than others. And one of the best things is having other people join in the interview process or take it over before people get to you. Because if you're the type of person like I am, who just presumes everyone is what they say they are and will do what they say, and believe in what we're doing, you're probably better off having someone in between that's vetting those people before they get to you. Because I'm a like, yeah, this person is going to work out kind of thing. So I'd say that's one thing that, and I still have trouble. I still have trouble. We're really bad at making those kinds of decisions, generally speaking, all of us, because I think we want to believe that people are like us.
Well, we're especially as entrepreneurs, we're visionaries and we're dreamers. We see the potential in ourselves. We see the potential in others, and we can put it in our mind. Oh, yeah, that person's gonna be really good at this or that, or I can see them going there or there. And I don't know that we're very critical of our assumptions, right? We're risk takers. I mean, to your point, I hired a GM recently to run Camo Crew, and his background is in recruiting. And I said, hey, I tend to believe people in interviews, right? Anybody can lie in an interview. You can lie in a resume. You can lie in an interview. Casey and I were in a partnership with a franchise organization in the past where we were told everything, and it only took us a few months, maybe by 6 month mark. Casey and I both independently were both like, yeah, this person's not what they say they are. They're not going to do the things they said they're going to do. And even 6 years later, they still haven't done the things that they said they were going to do. But you don't know that. You go in wide-eyed, you go in there with expectations, and you're right. It all comes down to who do you pick as a partner. What's that case?
Yeah.
I said you have to have a level of trust, and you have to put yourself out there to get burned, unfortunately, as an entrepreneur. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck doing everything yourself. That's just how it is,
Yeah. So, I really do like, I like the way you took that question of, hey, let's not talk about the 100 mistakes, but hey, what do we do right? So let's go down that vein. Let's think optimistically and positively, right? So for our listeners, we actually, right after you, we're actually we're recording 2 podcasts in a row just because we had an oddball week next week. And there's a guy that reached out to us. We're only a handful of episodes in. He reached out out of nowhere. He's like, hey, I got a job. I work second shift. I want to haul junk. What do I need to know? So I want to, we're, right after you, we're going to sit down and talk to him. And Casey and I are going to think this through and talk this through. You're still in the game per se. Actually, let's start there. Let's start with first, what are you doing these days? And then second, I want to have a conversation with people that want to get into the waste industry, right? We're going kind of a level up here, not just junk removal, but the waste industry in general. What do you've been involved for 40 years almost? I mean, math says it's been.
Wait.
I mean, I want to take you that long. 22 and 4 plus, 7 carry
so
the 1.
It's been about 30. It's been about 30 years.
30 years.
A little over 30 years.
We won't say 40.
Not quite 40.
I thought.
Yeah, let's round down. Let's round down, not up.
Just a hair over 30.
Yeah.
We'll
Thank you.
You're welcome. A hair over 30. So let's go there. So what are you up to these days? So you sold your company 7 years ago. You're certainly not retired, right? Or maybe you're quasi-retired. So what are you up to these days?
No.
And then I want to transition. What advice you have for someone that wants to get into the waste industry in general? What are things that you'd want to look at and avoid potentially?
Yeah. So one of the things I want to say is that why is it so great to be an entrepreneur? It's super hard. You know that.
Yeah.
You guys know that, right? It's super hard. And you think to yourself, why do people want to do it, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs don't know the answer to that. They don't know the answer to that. They just keep doing it because they've chosen to do it and they don't know what else to do. And then you've got all these other people who won't do it because they're either afraid or there's all kinds of challenges in front of them that they don't want to. They look at that and they won't even take the first step. But what's so great about being an entrepreneur is when you do it right, and nobody does it right out of the gate. But when you do it right or you get it right, you create freedom and options instead of obligations in your life. And that's why you want to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about owning your own business or the pride or whatever, or legacy, it's about freedom. That's what I believe. And options instead of obligations. So I want to say that first. Now, after I sold the first business, I worked for the new owner for a couple of years in a transition role. And then I started another similar business when my non-compete was expired. And that one I did with a private equity sponsor. So instead of a bootstrap, I basically partnered with private equity, used their funding, or the majority of our funding was to them, and we accelerated the process, and we were able to build a company. In 3 years, that was about half the size it took me to build a company in 22 years prior. And through a number of fortunate events and timing, we were able to sell that business last year for a really nice return for everyone. And so that was sort of my second waste company.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have my own podcast. It's called How'd It Happen? I've been doing that for 3 years. I've got over 300 episodes of that. I wrote a book. My book's called Ownershift: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. So I got that done. And now I'm looking, I've invested in over 100 privately owned companies. So that's a great way to get an education. Like, that's how I look at it, at least. And then I'm looking at, I'm in the process of purchasing another business right now that's not in the waste space. And later, who knows? I'm sure there'll be waste opportunities that come my way again.
So I want to.
And maybe I'll pursue them. Maybe not. Who knows?
I want to jump on a couple of these. All right, so let's go with your book real quick. I thought I heard something. Yeah. What was it? What's the title of it again? And the tagline?
It's called Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck.
Oh my God! All right, you got 60 seconds. Explain that. Explain that book.
Love it.
Yeah, I just love it. I just like selfish is a negative word, but I've also realized in business it's not about selfish. Like right now, I think we're pending we're already in a recession, right? Fuel prices are astronomical, and I hate the word selfish because it has a negative connotation. But you gotta take care of you first. So I want to hear what that means, that book title and tagline. What does that mean to you, and how did you get to that conclusion? That's interesting.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the title first before the subtitle. Yep. So ownership, right? So owning a business, being an entrepreneur, is really about making shifts, because you start. Like I separate the journey into 4 stages. You've got your dream stage, and then you've got your grind stage, and then a lot of us go through what I call the break stage, and then you've got your breakthrough stage. That's stage 4. That's really where you want to be, right? You want to be in dream and breakthrough all the time, but the reality is the world doesn't want you to be there.
Yeah.
Your customers don't want you to be there. Your employees don't want you to be there. Your vendors don't want you to be there. The regulators don't want you to be there. There's all kinds of people that don't want you to be there. So all of that usually ends up with you spending a lot of time in those 2 inner stages, which is grind and then break. And like I mentioned earlier, the most entrepreneurs, they get into it and then it's just like repeating it, and they have no idea what they want to get out of it. They don't even know what freedom means. They don't know what options mean. They just know what grind means. And that was my journey as well.
Yeah.
So the shifting part, you hear a lot about, it's very popular for people to say, I pivoted now, I pivot this, pivot that. And I sort of reject the pivot, because I don't think people pivot. I think they shift. And there's a meaningful difference, because pivot is basically, one foot standing still and the other one moving. Mm-hmm. Like think of basketball pivot or a pivot on a machine. Well, that's not what people do. They move a little bit in one direction. It could be sideways, frontwards, backwards. Sometimes they move willingly. Other times they move unwillingly. So I look at it as a shift rather than a pivot. So that's one. And then the getting selfish thing is really simple. Yeah, you're right. It's a horrible word for most people, because that's what you're taught it is. Yeah. And instead of applying the definition of the word properly, most people define it as they apply it to someone who's egotistical or conceited or those kinds of things. And that's not what selfish is. Selfish is about knowing what you want. And to become a great entrepreneur and to get back in the breakthrough stage, you have to actually know what you want. And not many people know what they want. I didn't know what they want. So I'm wallowing around in this break stage after my partner, Butch, who I mentioned, passed away in a fire at one of our plants.
Oh, shit.
So I lose my partner, I lose my best friend, and we're about 11 years into the business. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Where am I going? Why am I here? And I'm looking around. I want to blame everybody, Andy, and Taylor. I want to, whose fault is this? Well, it wasn't anybody's fault. It was my fault. I was exactly where I designed myself to be, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't like it. So in order for me to design, the good news is that if I could design something that put me in a place where I didn't want to be, there's a skill to that too. So maybe I can, design a system that puts me where I actually do want to be. And that's where getting selfish saved my entrepreneurial career, and probably a lot more of the components in my life, because I started focusing on where exactly do I want to be. Mm-hmm. And then once I knew what I wanted my future to look like, I could own it. I could make my future my property. And once I accepted that, I was able to plan better. I was able to understand where I wanted to go. I could get a concept of what freedom and future look like, and then I could start working toward it. And that's exactly what I did, with a lot of help.
No,
it's,
go ahead, Casey.
That
go.
was more than 60 seconds.
Oh my
sorry,
God.
but-
I had 37 responses there. And I know I'll let Casey get on the mic because there was so much substance there. Casey, take it away. Go ahead.
So you may not know this, but I'm on my second business and started it in November after I sold a previous junk removal business that I ran and operated for almost 6 years. And even to this day, I'm not satisfied. I know it sounds bad. I fight with myself. I do. I'm like, but I'm doing what I have freedom. I have this, but I'm still not happy because demolition, I know how to do it very well, but I don't love doing it to the point where I want to do it forever. So I'm actually in that phase of what do I want to do? Because right now, as sad as it is to say, demolition pays my bills, gives me time at home with my family. I mean, I work maybe 15 days a month. I'd say I average. Actually, it's on my board. I need $6,000 a month. I want 10. I average 8. My average job is good enough where I can get one job a month and I'll be happy. But I'm not, because I'm still in that phase that you just spoke of where it's like, what am I missing? Oh, wait, I'm missing comfort. I'm missing, I'm happy with one job a month, but what if I don't work next month? Oh,
right.
Well, then I'm back to phase one of scared shitless. What do I do? I just think it's interesting you said that, because selfish is a very bad word. But in entrepreneurship and business ownership, if you're not selfish, you will not last. You're going to fail.
I went out of my way in 2020 to keep as many employees as I could, keep work out in front of them. And the second the economy opened up and the second they could jump ship, they did. And all that time, effort, and money I invested into people to save their job went to shit. Now we're looking at potential recession, and I already feel bad knowing that there's going to be some things that get cut. Right? We closed a side business here. We closed our resale business this year because my mom wanted to retire and no one wanted to do it. And over the last two months, people are like, "Oh, why'd you sell it? Why'd you sell it?" I'm like, because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. It wasn't making enough money. My mom wasn't excited about doing it. It was right. And I selfishly closed it, right? The community wanted it, but their want wasn't greater than my want to have my weekends with my family. That's it. You said it. The biggest difference, actually, I wrote it down and I'm going to steal it if you didn't already copyright it. Options over objections. Obligations. Sorry. I can't even read my own handwriting. Options over obligations. I actually wrote it with a line in between because that's it. Right? Do you have options, freedom, or obligations? I'm still in the Army Reserve. 2 days a month, I got to put my uniform on. I got to shave. I got to cut my hair. And I actually love my job. I'm a career counselor. I sit and talk to soldiers. But I'm like, man, I got to do that, not I get to do that. Because I have to be there. Now, once I show up, I'm in a great mood and I'm having a great time, right? I genuinely love being around troops and I love being in the Army. But it's the fact that I can't go to the beach. I can't go to the park with my daughter. I can't travel that weekend. It's that mindset. It's like my girlfriend now, one of the challenges, not huge challenges, but she has PTO. I'm like, I can't spell PTO. I don't have to worry about PTO, right? There's no one, I put it on my calendar. I'm out of office and that's it. Now, the flip side is my phone can still always ring. I'll always pick up for our employees and our vendors and our partners that, to the best of my ability when it's my thing to handle. But I like having options, the freedom to do it. Like Casey and I think we're at episode 7 or 8. I'm sure Taylor, our producer, will probably come in here from the other room and yell at me and tell me what 7. You're 300 episodes. What are we at, Taylor? This is episode 8. Casey wasn't there for episode 7. We had a fill in. Okay. You're 300 episodes in.
Oh yeah,
you had a baby. Let's go. We are 23 minutes into it. We're just congratulations.
Where are your priorities? Holy crap.
I sent him a text message. We talked. I saw the pictures on Facebook.
Dude, just today, my wife was like, for a minute, I forgot we had a new baby. I'm like, it happens. Because we have a 4-year-old too,
You know what? The running joke is I was at a park this week with my daughter. She's 8 now. So she's at that stage where it's like, I don't have to, she'll figure it out, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
But I was joking with a lady. I was like, hey, you know what? As long as you leave with as many as you show up with, it'll all work out. Like someone will figure out they got the wrong kid. Again, so I am 100% leaving the park with as many kids as I showed up with. Right. That's it. And it always gets sorted out who you left with. True story. A couple of years ago, my daughter left the park to go get an orange juice because she saw me go over there and she wanted to follow me, and I came back a different way. I lost her for 5 minutes, and that is the worst feeling. I mean, like Casey and I have been overseas, Iraq, and seen some nasty stuff, and those 5 minutes were the worst 5 minutes of my life. I've seen bad. I'm not gonna say worse, but seen some stuff, gone through some stuff. And those 5 minutes, and we were at a park, and she found some random lady who was the nicest person ever, and she was petting a dog and got orange juice. So she was like totally happy. She was like, oh yeah, that's my dad. We're good. Like, wasn't phased at all. Worst 5 minutes of my life. Anyways, way off topic there. All right. So I was talking about, making those decisions, right? At the end of the day, even with a family business, it's a business more than it's a family. That's the critical fact there. So what were some of those key decisions, or even, that the second time around, it sounded like, you got some VCs, and it was more, was the goal there from day one with that second business, grow it, sell it, profit, and drive on? Did you walk in day one? Because one of the things you're talking about between breakthrough or break and breakthrough is not knowing what the destination is. And I struggle there. I'm in the middle of, I'm doing grind, right? I'm right. And I'm at breakpoint now, based on your definition. I call it struggle. Same, right? I'm in that right now with my business. Casey is too. Was it because you had the end state in mind of selling, or what did you have to do, transition of thought or practice, to go from break to breakthrough? What do guys like Casey and I need to do? Because that's one of the reasons we got out of the franchise world.
So here,
go ahead.
So here are a couple things. Here are a couple things. I'll go with Casey first. So you want to work 15 days a month, and you want to spend that time with your family, and you probably want to grow your business too. So, right, like, I'm looking at that and I say, well, that's great. Good to talk about. You're doing it, so you've proven that. But how do you get past that? How do you get to $20,000 a month and you're working 15 days a month?
Yeah.
Not right. Not how you get to 10,
fear,
but how you get to 20, right?
Yeah, and like my biggest fear is it's one of those cake and icing things, right? Like, you can't have your cake and eat it too, or whatever. Like, I already kind of started building an empire, and then I sold that company. And I know what it takes. It takes everything. It takes drive, 7 days a week. And that was the thing, is I stopped because I didn't want, I was like, look, if I have the option of not killing myself 24/7, why not take it? But the issue is now the rewards that came with that let's build an empire attitude are different with let's build a comfortable empire, right? That's what I'm kind of facing.
So here's what I'd say with that. You're in a place where a lot of us are. I've been there for sure. I've got two things that I would challenge you with. One is, do you really want to be an entrepreneur? Because if so, you got to be thinking big all the time, even to get to freedom. You can't. There's no like magic wand for freedom. You got to get to and the other thing is, and we all have this tendency, and I was so had this tendency, which is everything needs to revolve around me, right? I need to have my hands in everything. People need me around. And what I found that by having that belief system, there were a couple things. One, I never challenged people or even asked them if they were willing to do more. I just brought people onto the team, told them what to do, and they did it. But they could all do more than what I was asking, or most of them. And so once I knew what I wanted my future to be like, and I wanted it to be different, I started asking people for more. Not because I wanted them to work harder or longer or whatever, but I wanted more of their brain, what they actually know, and what they could take off of my plate and do that I would have never asked someone to do before because I thought that was mine. So that's one thing that's super liberating to do that. And yeah, you will have people that disappoint you along the way, just like you do, like in Andy's thing, where you say, I wanted to keep people employed during his 20s. Well, maybe that was it. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I'm not inside of your head. But the fact that they leave, I might look at it differently just to make myself feel good and say, hey, if it wasn't for me, they wouldn't have the skills that they needed to get a better job than what I could offer them.
Yeah.
So now I need to up my game, right? If I'm going to keep people as they get better, I have to provide them with opportunities that are that line up with their new skills and capabilities, which means I have to be growing the business, right? That does. So those are just a couple of things that come to my mind based on what I was hearing.
Yeah,
I do think.
Go ahead, Case. Go ahead,
Andy. You remember Paul, right? The guy who worked for me.
Yeah.
So I had a guy that worked for me. He was my first full-time employee. I mean, literally just scaled up the ranks. Great worker. And then I noticed that he was always a hard worker. He'll do anything and all the time. He ended up quitting, and he lied to me, but he quit. He started his own junk removal company behind my back. And I was so bitter at first. But I started to realize, I was like, technically, I did my job really well, because over those 3 years, I taught him everything to the point he was comfortable enough to leave a secure job and start his own thing. Now, granted, he's doing the same thing. I mean, he's in a truck. He's a self-employed junk removal guy. He hasn't grown, but the fact that I got him to that spot, I actually got over my bitterness and was like, you know what? Like, I'm glad he did it. Cool. He hurt my feelings for like a minute. That was about it. But other things, it's hard when you got employees. You got to look at, like, how do I ask them to do more without, coming off wrong? Because you
make it about them.
You probably know more.
Yeah,
right. I mean, you know more than anybody. How do you?
Let's not ask the recorder. Yeah. So, Mike, how do you do that? Right. That's not.
You make it about them, right? Look, everybody's in life for themselves. Number one, but even the most generous person, preservation, their own future is the most important thing to them. So make it about them. Why is it good for them to be challenged with this new opportunity or this new capability or whatever? And make it about them. And when they believe it's about them first and about you second, you've got a winner. And if you've got someone who's like, then you know that in order for you to grow, you're not going to be able to keep that person, right? Because you're always going to be doing more than you want to do, because they won't do more than they won't do what you think they're capable of. So it's a great way to filter people out of your life that can't help you achieve the future you want. And it's also a great way to keep people that will help you get, accomplish the future that you want to accomplish.
Yeah, they want, it does remind me, A players want to be around A players. They want to be held accountable like an A player. And when you put your time and energy into the C players and the D players, right, that old 80-20 rule, then the A players will leave because they're not getting the challenge, the attention, the recognition, because you're spending your time on bottom feeders. Right. And that's it. And that's not, I'm not being disrespectful, but there's some people that have an entry-level mindset. I fired a guy last month, 6 weeks ago, whatever it was, who would work for me for 3 years on and off. And he's 56 years old with an entry-level mindset. 56 years old. He wanted a promotion. He got promoted. He couldn't handle the responsibilities of the promotion and was back to the blame game he was at when he was entry-level. But he didn't want to do entry-level work because he thought he knew more. And like you said, it was simpler to, we have a joke in the military. If you want to get rid of somebody, promote them. It's the fastest way to get rid of somebody. But that's also the same token in the civilian world. Sometimes your biggest problem child in the organization is because they want more responsibilities or they're not in the right role. So I love the idea that you're talking about shift, not just you, but then also shift people, put them other places and, or shift your weight, lean into stuff at times, or have other people lean into their what they want. I've also found, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, Mike, a lot of people, when you give people what they think they want, when they have it, all of a sudden it's not what they wanted. They wanted something different, but it was masked as something else. Is that consistent with your experience?
Yeah, there are, first of all, that term bottom feeder, I don't know that I would use that, Andy. I would say there are some people who are never going to be able to do more, but they do they do really well, and you need them doing that thing, right? So you always need you always need some of those people. I found in my experience, everyone who's a high performer, almost everyone who's a high performer, thinks they want to try being the manager, thinks they want to try being the leader, thinks they've got a future that's bigger, and some of them do, and some of them don't. But there's really no way to know that until they try it. They don't know it. You don't know it. The bad part about that, and you mentioned the military example, oftentimes when someone does try something and they're not able to do it, it's difficult to put them back doing what they were doing. It's difficult for them, psychologically, and it's difficult for your organization because people are like, well, that guy or that gal couldn't do it.
It's almost do or die.
There's always there's always a risk to it on both sides, but that's the way life should be. It should be. If you want to move up, it's going to be risky. It's the way it is.
I'll adjust fire with what I was saying. Bottom feeders, certainly not, especially in junk removal. We have a lot of guys that want to come in and bang jobs and they have no desire for more. And I'll tell you, those are honestly the guys that I love working with the most. The people that
you need
exactly. And they want they want the stability of the wage. Correct, they cap themselves out. And you can still compensate them in other ways. You can still, right? Not everybody has to be the leader, but you need really good doers that are really practical. Actually, the guy that has been with us the longest, his name's Jerome. He started 5 years ago. It's 5 years this month. He has wanted more leadership. We've given him more leadership. And then we got to a point where he didn't want that more leadership. So he was one of those guys that we tried to work with more strategic things. Mm-hmm. But like today, he was doing a demo job. He can just bang it out. He knows how to do it, but he'll be the first one to say, hey, the guy he was working with today, he's like, you know what? I need somebody different for me to be highly successful. And you're like, okay, I'll take it. My challenge when I said the bottom feeders, and while I refer to not people with an entry-level desire, right? That's awesome, right? There's people, probably big entrepreneurs that look at us as bottom feeders, whatever, entry-level, whatever, right? We don't want to go bigger, better, make more money, whatever it is, right? It's a matter of scale. The challenge I have is with the people that have an entry-level work ethic with I should be in charge mindset. Those are the ones that the ones I struggle with because
deserving people who deserve something rather than
it is this entitlement. When we hired our new GM, Ken, I interviewed him. It was the course of 3 interviews. We spent over 6 hours talking. And the most profound thing he said was, I don't work for you. You don't work for me. We both work for the company. We just have different levels of risk and liability. You put in more than I did. And so I respect that. And I'm like, you know what? Wow. But with him, it was also interesting. What you just said too was, hey, what's in it for me? Ken's opportunity was, hey, I want a steady paycheck, but I also want to own a company someday. So we structured a deal for him that over time he gets equity in this organization. And now he's happy because he's not taking the same level of risk and liability. He's not risking his dollars, but he's certainly risking his time and his effort. And I have the money, he has the time and effort, which to your point gives me the freedom to put my time and effort into the podcast, into my book, into traveling, into going down by Casey and learning how to run an excavator in 110 degree Texas heat maybe this summer. We'll see if that turns out. He wants me to come down in August and tear houses down with him. I said, I'll come in February or January.
Okay.
Anyways, but that's it, right? Like I learned from a guy, Michael Creed with Luminate Home Loans. I learned this from him. But 6 months ago, he was doing a speech with the Idea Collective. And what I learned is everything comes down to three inputs, which is time, money, effort. And once you figure out who's willing to put in what, you can figure it out, right? And I think that's interesting. I like what you said. You're not wanting people to work harder or more, but you want to get more out of them to see what they want to do more of or different of. And that's just effort. And why are we, the leaders of the organization, the ones capping people's potential effort when we don't know? I love that. Just ask the question.
I found, when Butch passed away, I think we were maybe a $10 million revenue business at that time. And I told you, what was going on in my mind. And that was 11 years in, and in the next 11 years, we became a $45 million business, and I had more freedom and options. Not 100%. It's never 100%, but I had more freedom and options than I had ever had in those first 11 years. And the ownership for me there was me shifting, not only understanding what I wanted my future to be like, but stop making the business all roll up to me. Give the other people the opportunity for ownership, not equity ownership even, I'm not talking about, but just owning a portion of the business so that they could make it better than I could.
I still struggle with that. I'm 6 years in. I'm on my second go around in junk removal, and I can genuinely say I struggle with that. I struggle.
It's okay. It's okay to struggle.
I'm struggling with not being the guy.
Yeah, everybody struggles with it
because that's why we start this thing, right? Because we want to be. That little bit of dopamine that hits when you got the answer to the question. I love that little bit of dopamine. It doesn't come from anywhere else, right? It's exciting. And the other flip side is I don't want our people to think like I don't care or don't have their back or they got to make all the decisions.
Yeah.
And it is this is my fourth go around, with third or fourth go around where trusting one person to run this business. Now, at one point, I had 10 locations across the country, and it's like almost anything. The 1/3s, right? There was 1/3 I could always trust. There was 1/3 I could never trust, and there was 1/3 I could sometimes trust. So I had 3 operators out in the field, or we had but we had 3 operators out in the field. Then I'm like, man, they get it. And then 3 where I'm like, I don't trust them with anything, and they unfortunately proved me right. And then 3 where it's like sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. And so I'm somewhat jaded now, handing it over to someone.
So can I say, Yeah.
I think we also like to create our own fights to fight.
Oh yeah, I get bored.
I mean, it may sound a little crazy, but I mean, you think about it, when things are going good, you're like, okay, what else can I add to the situation or problem to fix? And, like for me, so Andy knows I have a guy named Altman, great dude. He is one of those guys, I trust him in my life. He's a doer. And I trust him to know if he messes anything up, he's going to come straight to me. Hey, dude, I messed this up. I fixed it, or I can't fix it, but you got messed up. Anyways,
right.
I would love for him to have the demo business one day, whether he wants it or not. He tells me he does. Whether he's ready for it or not, I don't think that's the question. The question is, am I ready for that? Because I have to train him to replace me, and I've already done that, and I saw what happened. Like you said, you have to make it about them. Well, this isn't like another Paul situation. This guy, he loves not doing shit. Like, honestly, he loves being home, not doing anything. So do I really want to build something up to the point where it's almost auto serving, and then just hand it over to someone who may or may not just want it? He may want it, but then when he gets it, he's just like, I got to work too much. But it's a problem that I created, honestly.
Can I weigh in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. So I would say, create a business that's as valuable as you can create, and then decide whether he's the person or someone else is the person. Because you're creating a business for freedom. That means value. You can't be worried about who you're going to turn it over to. Worry about how it can be as valuable as possible today, tomorrow, the next day, while also serving your desires, your desire for freedom, your desire for time off or whatever. That's how you build a good business. And this is just my opinion. And Andy, getting back to yours, definitely have experienced what you just shared many times. And what I say to everybody when it's in those situations, whether it's me or anyone else, is like, "But did these people have a gun to their head when they joined my company, or did I invite them in?" Well, I invited them in. So if I invited them in, I either have to win with the team I have because I invited them, I chose them, or I got to change the team. I can't complain about it. It's just,
I'm going to have to fly up.
They're here with my permission.
Oh, well, this is awesome. He's hitting so many points.
It is. Right? Well, what's interesting here, Mike, is so I was telling before this, Casey's like, "Hey, what do you know about Mike?" I was like, "Well, I know we had lunch. We sat for about 90 minutes and didn't stop talking." I said he's slow and methodic, which is two things that you and I aren't. So and there's a calm demeanor to you. And most people I meet in the waste industry are either jaded or they're stuck in their ways. And there's not a lot of people that you sit down and have lunch with in the waste industry. I went to the Waste Expo last 3 weeks ago, whatever it was, in Vegas.
2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago, whatever it was. Yeah. And it was a lot of people that they don't want to share their secrets, or they're stuck in their ways. Like what I find out, and I didn't even know about you being fired from the company years and years ago. I just knew you said you started on a trash truck, and then all of a sudden you owned a business, and you sold it, and you started another one when you sold it, and now you're investing in businesses. I was like, man, the depth of knowledge. I don't think I knew about your book. I knew about your podcast. But what you're saying is what guys like me that, I need to hear, because I can tell you how to scrap. I can tell you, time, material, how to build a load and be profitable. But it's this, okay, what do you do after the 9 to 5 grind, right? Or 7 to 5 grind, right? I look at the 7 to 5 grind, right? That is from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. we're working, right? Even now, like at 5 o'clock on Mondays, we record our podcast because I work on the business after hours. That's and not just on the business. I'm working on myself. I'm working on professional speaking. I'm working on, learning and coaching and mentoring and networking, right? I mean, you and I are local, but hey, if you invested in 100 businesses, I would love to hear what they're doing and how we can work together on those, It's good to have someone like you that's not jaded about the industry. The waste industry is as sexy as you make it. I think it's interesting. I love it since I was a little kid. Like you said, trash trucks running down the road. I grew up on my grandparents' farm, and the smell of fuel burning off a tractor, like that just gets me. Fresh cut grass from cutting alfalfa with my grandpa. Like that gets me excited. The smell of the landfill, as nasty as it is, there's this weird methane aroma that you're like, all right, I'm working, boys. Right? Like I get excited about it. I do. I talked to a company in Janesville today that has a pulverizer that pulverizes tube TVs, and they are one of the few places in the country that does this. And I'm like, I called them. I was like, hey, can I come take a tour? And they're like, are you serious? I was like, yeah. Like, I'm so excited to watch TVs get pulverized and then turned into tile and ceramic and fake ceramic stuff. Like, I get so excited about this industry. So I can't thank you enough, Mike, for having the knowledge in the industry and bringing it forward and bringing it with an optimism, right? We're not sitting here talking pessimistically about the economy and all this other stuff. You're being optimistic about what do you, the individual owner operator, need to do different so that you are successful. So now you're 100
and getting out of our own way.
Oh, it's all about getting out of our own way.
Yeah.
So what now? What are you doing now? What are you doing now? What excites you now that you're out of wastewater, but you're still in business in other businesses?
Yeah, well, I've got a mission, right? I've got a couple of missions, but one of my missions is to I want to help 1,000 entrepreneurs create companies that are worth $20 million or more. And then I want to encourage those 1,000 to help 10 others do the same thing. And if I'm anywhere nearly successful with that, that's like $200 billion of value that entrepreneurs like you and Casey and people who are listening, make happen. And that is not only a tremendous accomplishment, but it's not tremendous for the entrepreneur only. It's tremendous for the world, for people, for all their customers and their employees and everyone else. And they, what I love about it is we're just normal people. And if I can support a normal person that has abnormal dreams and is willing to work, like you guys have said, and is willing to work to achieve those dreams, and I can play some small role in helping them do that, I don't know that there's any professional work that I could do that's more meaningful. So that's number one. Number two, I love investing and exploring new entrepreneurial activities. So I mentioned that I'm looking at a business now that I'm excited about because it's new for me. And I want to see whether I can be successful in another industry outside of the waste business. So that's like an exciting thing for me. And third, I've got an ownership coaching program that I do with highly successful entrepreneurs, and I help them, imagine the futures they want and then put the steps in place to make it happen. Like what happened to me. Because there's a need for that as well. So and besides that, my podcast and some other writing stuff I do, that's where I spend the majority of my time, my working time.
No, I love all of that. So you said you want 1,000 companies that you are personally touching to grow to $20 million in revenue.
Yeah,
value. $20 million in revenue.
So whether that's revenue or value, okay. Doesn't matter.
So how do you have 100 companies now? So what does that look like? What do you?
I have over 100 right now.
What are those all types of companies? What's the involvement you have? What's the obligation there? I would love, selfishly, right? I'll use your word, selfishly. I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the activity, my direct activity, is all over the board with them. You can imagine that with that many, there's not a lot I can do for all of them. But I'm not in it to so I'm helping them financially, right? In a modest way. I'm not they're the majority shareholder in the company. I'm helping them in a modest way. And why is it good? Two things. One, it doesn't create an obligation for me. I invest, and I hope I'm supporting them, so I'm achieving my goal. Second, and it's not just a one-way street. A lot of these companies that I'm investing in are doing work that I don't know anything about. Right? So it's like technology I don't know anything about, biomedical, all this stuff I don't know anything about. So it's like an MBA for me. I'm learning from these companies and these founders that I'm invested in about things that living in where I live and being in the circle that I'm in would never come to me otherwise. Just wouldn't happen. So that's why I love that part of it. So it's for most of them, Andy, it's just a modest financial interest in the company, but it's more powerful than that because I'm helping them and they're helping me. So it's a very symbiotic, reciprocal relationship. And then on others, I have a bigger role. I might have a board advisory role, or I'm an LP in a fund that's invested in the company and those kinds of things.
What's an LP?
Limited partner. So yeah. So yeah, and some it's just like, oh, I helped that dude. Like, oh, I helped Andy through a particular challenge that he was having, or I helped Casey through a particular challenge. That's assistance, right? That's helping someone. But right now, from an accounting standpoint, I'm keeping count on companies that I've invested in that meet that, and I aggregate it too. So if one, some of them are going to fail for sure. Some of them aren't going to meet 20 million in value, but some of them are going to grow to 100 million, right? So I'm not picky about how I keep score, but I'm 56, I got 100 some, so I got a long way to live. And I think 1,000 is, I get some returns and reinvest those returns. I think 1,000 is definitely a doable number.
I love, here's what's interesting. I remember when I first started business, $10,000 was this astronomical amount of money. I basically needed $10,000 to start, and I had 100, and now I talk about $100,000 or $1 million like it's $100 because and I learned this.
No, you got 10,000.
Right now I still only have 10,000, but I talk about 100. But no, I joke about that. Right, business is you're just adding zeros over time. I told someone earlier. I was meeting with a woman that the first summer I was in business, she was doing resale for me. She was 17 years old, going to college, or I'm sorry, high school online, just to like bare minimum. I didn't know this till now. She was living in the back of her warehouse where their then boyfriend, and they had a resale shop. Like I never even knew that. I just knew they came and bought stuff from us. Anyways, we were talking a little bit earlier today. I'm like, I'll get upset if I spend $150 on a dinner that's not very good, but I'll spend $150,000 to repair my roof on my building because it's got to get done. right? That's like just the polarity of how you value money. So I think I love how modestly you're like, I'm 56, right? Most people are working on their handicap at 56, and you're like, I got 100 and some change companies, and I'm gonna get to 1,000, and I've periodically done it.
Yeah.
And the fact that you said, you know what, some of them aren't gonna make it, and you've already calculated that, and you've accepted that, because as entrepreneurs, we're not really good, at least I'm not, at accepting facts sometimes, because we're so emotionally invested in the businesses or the people or the dream that we struggle with some basic reality, right? You got to keep a scorecard. You got to have your KPIs and recognize where you're at and where is it compared to where you want to be. You got to have that destination in mind.
I think also, real quick, the one thing I run into a lot with junk removal people, right? Junk haulers, whatever companies they want to call themselves, they think that they're going to hit astronomical numbers. And I truly believe, unless you go national, nationwide, franchising, whatever, to put it into better terms, you're going to cap out at 7 figures as a private owned junk removal company. The reason I say that is because I've seen Andy and I've seen what I've done. And in junk removal itself, 7 figures is a great number. But when you get into 8 figures, there has to be contracts. There has to be, multiple locations running at the same time, at the same rate. And it's hard for me to tell these guys, like, yeah, you're right. One day you're going to be doing $20 million a year when I see how they operate. So what I do is I say, you know what, let me help you try to get there. But I'll tell you what I know. I'm not going to tell you, you're going to fail. And honestly, I think a lot of them don't understand what $1 million looks like versus 10. When we hit 7 figures, like, honestly, we hit it our 3rd year. I remember we were doing this stuff and we had a meeting and my mom was like, hey, this is what we did for the year. And I was like, oh shit, cool. And then I said, how do we get to 1.5? Like, how do we do more? It wasn't enough.
I remember I told this, Casey knows this story. Ian, one of our guys, he's been with us 5 years now. He had been with us, I don't even know, not even a year, 9 months maybe. And we moved into the building and I was talking about this and the other thing. And we went from a 700 square foot garage to a 27,000 square foot building. And he goes, when does it end? And I looked at him, I said, we only just begun. What do you mean, when does it end? And I remember my first full year in business, I sat there in the living room at my brother's house, my house, my brother lived in it, where we ran the business. I said, we're going to do $500,000 this year. And my parents walked out of that meeting, right? Because that was our board, mom and dad. And I'm in my 30s, like I'm an adult, right? This isn't a 17-year-old kid saying it. I said, we're going to do $500,000 this year. And my dad walked out and he's like, I can't even conceptualize $500,000. Because even with remodeling, his best year in remodeling was like 300,000. He's like, there's no way there's $500,000 in junk. We did $904,000 our first full year in business. And I didn't even, right? I didn't set it high enough. And that's the challenge I've had as an entrepreneur. It's like, I've dreamed bigger than those around me, but I need to be around guys like you, Mike, and the companies you invest in, because I need to be around people that dream 20 million, because 10 ain't enough. And if you can do 1, you can do 2. If you can do 2, you can do 4. If you can do 4, you can do 8, 16, and man, 20 million is around the corner. Now you got to understand how you got there and scale and everything else. So selfishly, how do you evaluate which companies you're investing in? Do you want to add junk removal to your portfolio? Like where, and what does that look like? Who are the companies? Who can we link you up with? Right. I'll put my name in the hat. Absolutely. I would love to have a mentor in your space, someone like you that can see next level, someone in this space, and you're well educated in other spaces. What does that look like? What, Casey, is that I can't see, is it your demo work sign? Are you advertising?
Yeah.
Is that your billboard? I like it. Oh, that's his. There we go. That's his billboard he has off the freeway right now. But what are you looking? What are you looking for, cool. Mike? For
So I'm first. A lot of the investments that I get into, I'm a follower, right? So there's a lead who I know who finds a deal, and I want to follow along with that. Now, that's different than businesses that I want to actually be a participant in. So let's take the junk business for a while. First thing I would do is I wouldn't call it junk. I don't know where that comes from, but to me, junk is small. And I don't know that I'm not saying it's small, but junk is small. But what's interesting, like, so I look at, so I would figure out, well, what could I call it that differentiates me from everybody else? Because if everybody's calling it junk, I mean, is everybody calling it junk because 1-800-GOT-JUNK calls it junk? I don't know. But when I started with, it's when I had Brian Scudamore on my podcast from 1-800-GOT-JUNK, he told me the origin story of how he got started, right? In Canada, they call it junk.
Yeah.
Right. So, he's in a McDonald's parking lot and he sees a guy with boards on his truck, and he's in college, and he sees a guy with boards on his truck. He's hauling around junk. Right. And Brian's looking, he was sort of a little non-enamored with school. And he's like, I could do that. Right. So that's where he started. Just like everybody, that's just like your friend that you said that, he left you and went and just started his own junk business.
Yeah.
But he didn't stay there. He didn't stay there. Right.
Right.
He developed a system around his business, and his business is probably worth $500 million now. Now he can call it junk. I don't know that you can copy that. So if I don't want to copy that, then how do I position it so that it's more, people think of it differently? This is just me talk. This is just, you didn't prep me for this question, so this is just me talking off the top of my head. But I also look at, like any business that's the same anywhere you go is a good business. Like the trash business, right? Why is the trash business a great business? Because everywhere you go, people put their trash in, commercially at least, they put it in a dumpster, a can of some sort, and a truck comes along and it dumps it, empties it, takes it to a place where it's processed, and then the stuff after it's processed goes to different places. But it's all the same. If you go to California, same kind of trucks. You go to Texas, same kind of trucks. Florida, same kind of trucks. Chicago, same kind of trucks. That's a business that you can systemize and make big. And the junk business obviously is a business that you can do that with as well, probably on a bigger scale than a very big scale, probably bigger than what Brian's even done. So yeah, huge opportunity. I don't know how to get from A to Z on that, but I'd be very interested in looking at it. People who have ideas how to get from A to B and build a real platform around it, and not have it be. You can't have it where you have people who come, show up for work some days and don't show up. They have to have like a full, it's got to be something where there's pride in having a career in it, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, I would really look at that business. I would look at trash. I would look at scrap, and I would say, these businesses are kind of the same everywhere. I like that, because the wastewater business, hazardous waste business, isn't the same everywhere. Everywhere you go in the country, there's different kinds of opportunities, because there's different kind of manufacturing. There's different kind of regulations. There's different kinds of this. There's different kinds of that. That's not. I mean, you can make a great business out of it, believe me, but it's not a business that's easy to take nationwide or global, because it's so different everywhere, which is why you don't see it that way. But a junk removal business with a, like I said, different name, I like it.
You bring up a good point. One of the reasons why it is called junk removal, and even with us, with our branding, our tagline here is "Got Clutter, Call the Crew," where we refer to as clutter, items, unwanted possessions, because junk has a negative connotation. One of the challenges is that the SBA, or the GDP people, right? I don't know who, right? Who I'm sure, whatever, the Department of something, right? Clarifies or qualifies junk removal as a subsegment of the waste industry and calls it junk removal, right? So it's a $10 billion industry. No, I would love to dig in. I think one of the challenges you have is, and this is one of the challenges Casey and I had when we're in the franchise world, is exactly what you said, is junk removal is not nearly as repeatable as traditional waste. Because to your point, I've had franchises in California, Texas, Chicago, and I've been to franchises in Florida and New York and other places. You're right. When you got the residential junk removal or residential trash, right? You got roll-offs, you got luggers, you got front end loaders, rear end loaders, Corrados for resi. And then like ASLs, automatic side loaders. And even like the waste management, they want to get rid of Corrados for the most part. They don't want to do bulk. They want to do just the automatic side loader, right? You're right, systematic throw. One of the challenges we've actually seen in junk removal is the truck combination is different. And also what you're doing is different. One of the reasons Casey and I would say maybe 40% of our business is the same. When we had the exact same brand, the exact same company, to a point where he's running pickup trucks with dump trailers. I'm running pickup trucks with utility trailers or box trucks. He's hauling brush, and we don't have brush in Wisconsin. So like and that's one of the reasons why we've shifted. Right now, I'm doing much more traditional residential and commercial junk removal, getting into a little more e-waste and scrap, while Casey's tearing houses down. I would love to sit down with you for you really to challenge my perspective on what is repeatable, because the 800 got junk figure out a way, right? They have the same truck, the same, 800 number. They've made it systematic and thorough, and a lot of other franchisees haven't, because there is a lot of regional aspects to junk removal, and maybe I'm just getting my own way, and that's not a hypothetical. I could be very just biased at how I do things here in Milwaukee.
Yeah. Well, you're right about the recurringness. So junk removal is a repeating business, but not a recurring business, meaning it doesn't have the frequency to be recurring. Mm-hmm. So, but it's something that you're doing for a homeowner, let's say, majority of the time. So if they trust you for that, what other things could you do for them that would create a recurring revenue business? Mm-hmm. That's just an idea. I don't know the answer.
There's some good answers. So like Casey down in Texas got into porter services, which is basically emptying trash cans, right? So you're emptying trash cans
for commercial
properties.
Yeah, at apartment complexes, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. I do bulk pickup, so I do curbside bulk pickup, wherein a big waste company owns the overall municipal contract, but they don't want to do the bulk, which is 5% of the contract. They don't want to dink around with it because they want to use their automatic side loaders. So we'll do the bulk. So I run the same municipal route every 5 days, right? Once a week, I run the same route. So it's not the same homeowner putting stuff out, but it's always stuff being put out. So we know that there's a seasonality to it. We know we're going to get a lot of stuff at the end of the month, beginning of the month. We know we're going to get a lot of stuff in summer versus winter. So you're right. It is repeat. In those contracts, there is reoccurring. So the volume might change, but 75, 80% of the work is the same, right? It's still the same route.
Well,
or when you're working for realtors or flippers that are consistently buying and selling, then there's a reoccurring aspect versus a homeowner where they might have repeat business over time, but not reoccurring. That is very predictable. And that's how you really have to build.
I noticed something.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Case.
Oh, I noticed something with Got Junk, and you probably have seen this too. They got in early with other national brands like Costco and Home Depot. So they had commercial contracts in place already, mattress companies, to where they would just be like, hey, my franchise, you're going to get calls from this company. They don't ask questions. They pay us. We pay you. Boom, boom, boom. Where I feel like a lot of junk removal, like I tell people all the time, contracts, they will save your ass so many times. Just do it. And they're like, well, how? I'm like, just talk to them. Ask these companies, hey, can we start off with a 6-month contract or a year contract? We had a few contracts that were small amount in the beginning. Like, hey, for a porter service, we had like one that was $150, 3 days a week for a year. You know, it's cool. It not just put us financially in a spot every single time. It put our trucks, our brand in the same spot 3 times a week in the morning, and it grew from there. And that's the other thing is, I think a lot of us don't understand the bigger picture when we start our business, whether it be junk removal or whatever, but especially junk removal. You see homeowners, they need stuff gone. Cool. Well, what makes money? How do you guarantee that homeowner to call you every single time? Well, you kind of can't, not with regular residential customers. But what you can say is, hey, this Walmart over here has a freaking problem with their pallets or their cardboard. Go talk to them. This mom and pop shop, it seems like they have this dumpster over here. Why not talk to them? Hey, how's your trash? I mean, is it a problem? And expanding, and that's the thing I think Andy and I saw early on, and we were pressuring our franchisor to kind of say, hey, I appreciate the discounts you can get us at like dealerships, but we want something that not just saves us money, but actually kind of helps our business grow, makes us money. Contracts that are, hey, we got a contract with company A. So wherever there's a company A around, you are the go-to guy.
Yeah. No, there's definitely
like
a
that.
recurring aspect to junk removal that can make it repeatable. And hell, maybe that's another episode. We dig into that, Mike, right? Because that's one of the challenges that,
Yeah.
well, that's one of the, right. A lot of people in junk removal, right? They're trying to get to 6 figures. And once they hit 6 figures, they're like, oh, 7 figures is right around the corner. But a lot of them, we see it. Casey and I have seen it. A lot of junk removal companies stall out between $250,000 and $400,000 because because they one truck, one guy, owner operator with a couple of helpers or maybe a second truck following him, whatever, can do 250 to 400, maybe 500,000. But they struggle to get out. And then once they
no salary guys,
right, and then they do get out, and then you get the Casey where Casey and I got where we got to 1.5 million in a few short years. But I have struggled, right? 1.5, you're in the 1.5, 2 range. How do I get from 2 to 5? And then 5 to 10. I could do 2.5 all day. And even our general manager, Ken, earlier was like, hey, why don't we expand? And I was like, I did that. And I expanded and I went fast and hard, and that didn't work. And I even expanded within the state, but I had the wrong operators, or I didn't have the, maybe I didn't have the right leadership, right? It's on me, right? And actually, Mike, you and I, when we sat down for lunch, one of the things you said is, well, what's next? Where do you expand to? How do you make it systematic? How do you make it thorough? How do you make it repeatable? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about that because where do I want to be? Do I want to be a guy that's got a little bit of freedom and a nice business and I'm very happy and something to pass on to my daughter? Or do I want to be in a position where I can help 1,000 businesses get to $20 million because I've done it before? Right? That's a huge jump in mindset. So, you did ask at the top of the hour, how long does this go? I said, Casey and I've had a couple podcasts that went 30, 35 minutes, and some have gone over an hour. I said, we'll see how the flow goes. I could do another hour with you, Mike, but with respect to your time and our audience, I'm already opening the invitation for round 2. I don't know when when we can get our schedules to line up again. I think there's a lot here I would love to unpack. I would love to have more of your time if you're willing. I'd love to keep this conversation going, certainly offline, and give our listeners updates as to what amazing things we can do. But let's put a bow on it today with respect to everybody's time. What can we do? What can our listeners do to support you? Obviously, there's kind of obvious things of buying the book, subscribing to your podcast, but take some airtime here and promote yourself. What can we do to give back? And then I have one last question after that.
Yeah, well, thanks for that opportunity. The best way to find out and connect with me is at my website, which is my name, Mike Malatesta, MALATESTA.com. And there you can find out about me. You can find out about my podcast, my book, my coaching. It's all there. And I'm very approachable and usually very responsive. So I'd say go there. If you like what you see, or you have some questions, or you want to do something, just reach out, and we'll see we'll see what we can do.
And I can endorse it 100%. Dr. Madan Kandula, he owns Advent here in Milwaukee, introduced Mike and I because Dr. Kandula was on Mike's podcast. I think he just gave us a text message introduction or email introduction, and within a couple weeks, whatever it was, I got on your schedule for lunch. I ran like 22 minutes late. I was kicking myself, but I was in that grind stage of my business, right? That day in particular, like, had to lay on the job, had to keep jobs in front of us. Thankfully, even just 2 months, it was probably about 2 months ago. I'm in the break stage now, definitely, and I got to transition to the breakthrough stage. So my last question, because it interests me, what's with the can collection in the back? It's been bothering. It's been on my mind for an hour and 15 minutes. I was like, I gotta ask. I gotta know what's going on back there.
That's a portion of my beer can collection from when I was a kid, and my mom kept it at home for 30 years.
Wow.
After I had moved away, and one day a couple boxes showed up here and my cans were in there, and I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. So I got this neat little space. It's like a loft space above my office, which is where I do my podcast and stuff. And I thought those would be kind of cool, because guys like beer cans, right? I mean, some of those cans are really old and they make most people, like, in their background, they got, their show hyped and all this stuff. And I never really wanted to do that. So I just wanted something different. And so I cleaned them all up, and my father-in-law built me some shelves, and there you go.
There you go.
That's it.
Beer can collection. I love it. It says everything I love about the world, right? It's beer cans are very much an American thing, right? It's very Americana.
Yeah.
It is recycling. It is advertising. It is business. And now it's repurposing. It's art.
It's art really, too.
Even now, I love it. I can see it the whole time I was watching in the background. We have a beer can collection here in our warehouse because we get the old tin tops, and occasionally they're cool, right? That's it. That's like, people are like, why do you collect, like, everything I collect? It's like, why do you collect it? I don't know. I thought it was cool. Why does anyone collect anything? All right. Well, we solved that mystery. If anybody else was waiting in suspense for an hour and 15 minutes to know what's going on with that beer can collection, they got their answer to that question. Mike, absolutely been a pleasure. I will follow up with you. We'll have Taylor, our smart guy, drop all your contact info somewhere in the show. Thank you again for your time. On behalf of Casey, Bubba Lawrence down in Dallas, Texas, I'm Andy Weins. Thank you, Mike. This has been episode 8 of the Trash Talk Business Podcast.